Perfect. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the panel today. I'll give a minute or two for everyone to join. I see we already have 45 people in here, so that's awesome. Cool. I see the numbers going up, so just giving some time for everyone to join. Can't believe it's already April.
I know. We're in a time warp.
It's crazy. Awesome. Still see some people joining. We'll get started in just a minute, and as some stragglers come in. Cool. Well, while everyone is still trickling in, I just want to kick things off, and I'll kind of give a little background on myself and Statusphere, and then we'll jump into this awesome panel on how to make it big in retail from brands that have actually done it. So we have some really awesome people that have joined us today that have seen what it takes to make it big in retail, and we'd love to share all of that knowledge with you all. So kind of just a little background on myself. So I am founder CEO of Statusphere. I've been a CMO in the marketing agency world, and I'm also a content creator myself. So I ended up creating Statusphere as a way for brands to scale their creator marketing by being able to match brands with creators to post about their product. And I created it after just finding a hole in the space where I just felt like it was hard to scale, specifically the micro influencer marketing space. So I was like, there has to be a better way to do it. So that's why I created Statusphere. So with Statusphere, we help people discover brands they love from people they trust. So the way that it works is we're a marketplace of brands and creators, and brands work with us to get people posting about their audience monthly and get great UGC for their brands. And because of that, we've worked with a ton of different brands in a variety of industries. CPG is definitely our bread and butter. We've done a lot in the beauty space and in the food space as well. And we just noticed that so many brands that we work with are trying to support their key retailers and constantly trying to learn how to expand and make their retailers happy. That's why we actually decided to do this webinar, is because I wanted to be able to share some of that information and learn myself exactly what it takes for these brands to expand that are successful in retail. Now at Statusphere, we do these sessions once a month. So we either do a webinar or a panel once a month. And we actually have a panel coming up, or a webinar coming up next month, that if you are interested in it, it is called The Power of User-Generated Content in 2022. So you can scan the QR code there if you'd like to sign up for that webinar. So we'll be covering, how to use UGC to drive sales. I actually attended a conference a couple weeks ago, and it's pretty crazy with all the iOS updates. Facebook actually just came out and said that the number one way to bring down your customer acquisition cost is by partnering with creators. So overall, I think that it's going to be more and more important moving forward of seeing how creators and UGC really plays into your marketing mix. And then kicking off today, so we will be covering what it takes to expand and into major retailers, how to successfully scale into multiple store locations, how to stay competitive on the shelves, and advice for achieving long-term retail success in such a crazy world that we're in today. And then we're going to leave some time at the end for Q&A. I also do want to mention that this will be recorded and sent to you afterward, so that if you miss anything or you want to go back and rewatch it or share it with any of your colleagues, that you can. So you'll get an email within 24 hours of this recording. So jumping into the highlight of our panel here is going through our actual panelists and all of the awesome achievements that they have. So first we have Melinda Johnson. She's the director of marketing for Henkel's U.S. hair business. She's senior marketing and strategy executive with over 15 years of building strong consumer brands at places previously like L'Oreal, Johnson & Johnson, and Procter & Gamble. Also has some advertising experience with CoverGirl, Clairol, the list goes on and on. So we're super excited to have her on the panel to talk about it from a marketing perspective of how to, expand and really make it big in retail in terms of achieving your sales goals. Then we have Doug Bouton, and he is the co-founder of, you might recognize Halo Top. I know I saw them everywhere, and I still eat Halo Top. It's an awesome ice cream brand. He's now the founder of Gatsby Chocolate. Halo Top had some explosive growth to more than 300 million in sales, and became the #1 selling ice cream in the U.S., outselling Ben and Jerry's, Haagen-Dazs, and Breyers. It's now in more than 30 countries. Doug has now started Gatsby Chocolate, and has been working to disrupt the chocolate and confectionery category. So if you want to check out his chocolate, which I recommend you do, you can check it out at gatsbychocolate.com, and they're quickly expanding into a bunch of stores as well. Then we also have Jennifer Weiderman. She is the Chief Marketing Officer at Hempz. She has Hempz's product portfolio, which encompasses, skincare, body care, hair care. I'm sure you've seen them at Ulta, Target, Walmart. The list goes on there as well. She has, along with working at Hempz, she has 25 years of experience in the beauty, nutrition, and fitness industries. So really excited to hear her insights of growing brands in those categories. And then we have Jesse Wolfe rounding out the panel. He is a serial entrepreneur, public speaker, and strategic business consultant. He founded Odang Foods in 2013, which you might recognize him from Shark Tank. I know he still is on the reruns, so I still catch those every once in a while. And it's always so exciting to see him on there. He built his company out of Florida, and has grown to over 14,000 store shelves nationwide, including Walmart, Publix, Fresh Market, Stop and Shop. But he also works with tons of other up-and-coming brands, so he's really seen firsthand what it takes to get into the stores. So excited to have all of these awesome panelists and ready to jump into some questions. So I'm going to stop sharing this deck so you can see everyone's faces a little bit better. And I'm just going to start by kind of letting everybody give a little background on kind of their journey in retail. And I'll start probably with the two founders, so Jesse and Doug. So I'll start with Jesse, if you want to talk about just your experience, a little bit of your background with Odang getting into retail, and then Doug will go to you. And then we'll hear from Jen and from Melinda about hearing it from a marketing perspective.
Yeah, thank you. So I probably stepped on every landmine you could have coming out of the gates. I came up with the idea for Odang literally towards the end of my college career. Was in a business plan writing class, had to come up with an idea. And right before that class had started that spring semester, I had my wisdom teeth pulled out, couldn't chew food, and came up with the idea of this, these kind of Ben and Jerry style hummus flavors, right? Because nobody was doing them at that time. When I came up with the idea, I had no idea what CPG stood for. I had no idea what grocery, retail, any of that looked like. So I just started making hummus out of my apartment and, basically forcing my friends to eat it. And that won me a business plan check for like $4,000. Third place, took that money, rolled it into farmers markets as my kind of first go-to market strategy. So from there, I quickly realized there was a potential. It was the way I found traction really easy and affordably. Again, not knowing what I was doing. And then from there, like any, savvy business person, I should have went to one grocery store, but instead I just knocked on the door of Publix right out of the gates and was apparently a pretty good salesman. I got them somehow to say yes. And then disaster ensued right after that because I had to figure out what co-packing was and distributors and brokers and how to manufacture enough product to fill 1,200 grocery stores in 3 months when my previous biggest grocery store was a meat market around the corner. So pretty unconventional, and I definitely learned trial by fire, if you will. But we pulled it off and, surrounded ourselves with a really great team and ended up, Publix nationwide, Kroger, Costco, all the big banners. And eventually I took an exit in 2020 on that brand, and have since moved on and used my lessons and learnings to build other brands and grow and scale and have all kinds of fun.
Awesome. Yeah, that is pretty crazy journey. Also, who did you actually talk to at Publix to get in? I'm just curious when you said knock at their door.
Oh, okay. This is a lesson of what not to do. So I went to UCF. All right, I'm pretty diehard, which is local to Publix's headquarters. So I just got on LinkedIn and I found somebody around my age that worked at Publix corporate office because I couldn't get past the secretary before, and I didn't know what a buyer was or how buyers worked. So I just found this guy on LinkedIn and I called up to the secretary and I'm like, hey, can I speak to, Joe? And she's like, sure. And Joe was in the floral department of the buying team for Publix. I'm selling hummus. And I'm like, hey, Joe. I'm like, do you remember me? My name's Jesse Wolfe. We had psychology together. I had no idea who the guy was. I just knew psychology was the largest class at UCF. Had like 5,000 kids per class. So like, what are the odds he'd even remember me if we did have it? And I said, hey, man, I started this hummus company. Everybody said we should talk. And he's like, oh, I'm so proud of you, like trying to play along. And he's like, that's awesome. Well, you need to talk to Melinda, over in the deli section. Let me introduce you. I was like, Joe, you're the best. Let's get coffee soon. So he patched me over to Melinda. And then I changed my tone. I'm like, hi, Melinda. My name's Jesse Wolfe. I'm with Odang Hummus. Joe told me to give you a call. He said you had to try my hummus. He works for Publix, said it'd be a good fit. And that was my foot in the door.
Very, very creative and an amazing story of getting in there. Awesome. Well, I'm excited to circle back on what you would do, moving forward differently, which we'll get through the next round of questions. But Doug, I want to hear from you. What was your experience getting into retail and expanding that way?
Yeah, oddly not unlike Jesse, very similar. Fake it till you make it. A lot of BS. I wasn't inspired by Vicodin as I imagine you might have been, Jesse, on after your wisdom teeth came out. But we had a good run. Back in 2013, that's when we started, and we were a frozen product ice cream. So D2C wasn't even that big at the time for food, and it wasn't even possible really for ice cream. Still really isn't for ice cream. So retail was our only option. So we really early on did the same thing. We were, I was emailing and calling and visiting the head offices. I was talking to the secretaries. I was making up stories about, hey, I'm so-and-so. I need the buyer's contact. I didn't know what CPG stood for. I didn't know what a buyer was. I didn't know what a broker was. I was just as green as Jesse. And I think there's so much shared experience among all entrepreneurs, especially kind of in the CPG space here. So hearing Jesse talk, I'm like, 99% overlap there with what we went through and what we were doing. And I remember one meeting in particular, we met with Kroger, and this was when we finally were starting to get some traction, but hadn't taken off yet. But Kroger is one of the first retailers that have us. So they saw the data before other retailers did. And they said, hey, what are your next flavors? And I was like, oh, we have 10. We had 0. And they're like, oh my God, we want all 10 and all stores, and we want them in 6 months. I was like, done. That's so easy. And then came out of that meeting and the company goes into a panic because I just completely lied to Kroger. But we supplied on time and in full, but it was a tough time. But again, that's just when you're selling to retailers, they don't care about you and they're not the nicest landlords. And so you do what you got to do to get in. And then hopefully all that matters is your sales. So once you're in, nobody cares what your product is. Nobody cares what your brand looks like. Nobody cares if they like you. They care if the units move. So that's all it's about once you're in.
Awesome. Yeah, I love talking with founders and hearing the stories. And I do feel like there is definitely a shared kinship there. But this is a perfect transition, kind of talking about moving units and sales, and moving over to the marketing side, because I think that that's such a huge piece, is being able to show them that you can move those units. I guess for Melinda and Jen, can you talk about the real retailers that you've worked with and any differences that you've seen in terms of helping marketing strategies to help move units in these different retailers? So I'll turn to Melinda first.
Yeah. So I love Jesse and Doug's stories. So I'm an engineer by training, and I started my career selling chemicals. So these guerrilla sales tactics, I absolutely love. A little different when you're working at a big company and selling in bigger brands. You don't have to quite, stalk your LinkedIn, buddy, but I love talking to founders too. I'm so inspired by the creativity. But yes, so I actually started my career selling chemicals. And so moving over to brand management was very natural because it's kind of like running your own little sales territory and your own little business. So I've been in brand management for about 15 years, as you said, Kristen. And I've mainly worked across beauty brands. So I've worked in hair care, hair color, cosmetics quite a bit. I've actually done 2 stints at retail. So I supported our Walmart sales team when I was at Procter & Gamble on beauty and personal care products brands, like Pantene, like Secret deodorant. So, and then my second stint was more recent with L'Oreal Paris at Target. And I think what's really interesting when you're kind of working on a brand and owning this brand and you love your little baby and the new products that you create, it's really great experience to go actually work at a sales team that's supporting the retailer, because you get to understand it from the retailer's eyes and understand what they're looking for to even get your product onto shelf, what is needed at that retailer for that particular retailer's shopper segmentation, who's buying their products, what their retailer strategies are, and whether your products, fit that. And I think as a brand owner, you get so caught up in your brand and incubating this baby and bringing it to market that you often forget, hey, this thing it's got to get sold in. So step 1 of selling anything, you got to get on the shelf. And then after you get on the shelf, you really have to make sure that you're supporting it and driving demand at that particular retailer so that people will buy it and it will continue to sell and you'll meet your units per store per week and you can stay on the shelf. So it's, kind of a virtuous cycle. So, I would say as a brand and marketing person, one of the biggest things that, you need to make sure you have is you need to make sure your product really has a unique selling proposition and that it's meeting a particular consumer need that the retailer will find attractive and they need kind of within their assortment. So I'll pause there, but yes, hopefully, Kristen, that answered the question, but in a little intro about myself.
Yeah, no, that was perfect. And one follow-up question is, when you were saying like units per store per week, I'm curious, as being on the marketing side, seems like you have a little bit of both sides you've seen, but like, how was that goal set? Is that set by the retailer that they're sending it to? Because I've also heard that, some of our brands are telling us it's like a dark hole of getting any sort of feedback from some of the retailers in terms of, sales data and pieces like that.
Yeah, so it can be. It's typically set by the retailer. So it's typically the category velocity average for your category. And typically you want to kind of meet that average or ideally succeed it. And then when you don't meet that average, you're kind of, you're bringing up the rear. So you're at that point, one, you want to get it up, but then you're fighting to kind of, keep your space at shelf. And I would say, over the years, that's gotten more and more difficult because the assortment at stores has just gotten proliferated. You have a lot of digitally native brands that are now competing with some of these kind of big box retailers. So there's just so much competition and space. And so every department within the store has to justify their sales space. So, you definitely have categories that are, start to lose their space over time. And then it's even more competitive, to stay there. So that units per store per week, I don't know a single salesperson who doesn't know that number or try to meet it. And you're right.
Yeah, I guess
you have
who typically, so the retailer will set it and give it to you, and then that's passed along to the sales. And then does it get all the way to the marketing team? Because I just am curious of like how that typically.
It does. It's important. And it's important as a marketer and brand owner to be really connected and tapped in with your key, your key selling teams, so you can understand like what those hurdles are. If you have issues, how can you work with them on intervention plans to get that number up? So that's it's an important metric. So one of the many. There's several, but that's a big one. I think Doug mentioned on time in full. It's another big one. OTIF, very important.
I will say, Melinda, I agree completely though. Units per store per week is the metric. And when you're below it, as we were for years and years, you beg and you plead to, hey, give us one more shot. We got
everybody's begging and pleading from the small guys to the big guys. We're all,
Yeah.
Yeah, it just seems like the retailers just have so much power. I guess, is there any time that a brand you've worked with you feel like has actually more power than the retailer, like any leverage? Like, is there anything they could do to give yourself leverage?
For a true startup brand, I don't mean to steal anybody else responding here. For a true startup, though, I don't think you'll ever get there. And Halo Top we were doing 350 million in sales in 2017. Like, I don't know if there was a more powerful brand in ice cream, but because we were a single product line in a single category, unlike the Nestle's and the Unilevers and the guys who control, huge market shares and can go over the buyer. If you can't go over the buyer to the C-suite, you don't really you're still, you're a tenant and they're a landlord, and they're not very nice as the landlord.
So
that's my experience.
Just to jump in off that, because I mean, Doug's like absolutely spot on. Like, you're just absolutely at the mercy. I have seen recently, I won't mention the influencer specifically, but Walmart, like this specific influencer on TikTok, Walmart approached him. This is the first time I've ever kind of seen a glimpse of this for like a young, like new brand. And they were like, we need you in our stores. And he's like, he didn't even have a product. And Walmart was like, make a product. And he's like, and he's a chef, this really like quirky chef. So he's like, okay, I'll make these dips. And they're like, we'll sell them on Walmart, online only. And when he kind of gave me a heads up, I'm like, it was like a friend of his that was helping him out with the whole thing. And I was kind of advising him on co-packers. I'm like, this seems kind of very out of character. And sure enough, he sold 10,000 units in 8 minutes about 3 weeks ago through Walmart online. And Walmart's like, now they're like, what else do you have? Anything you need, we'll work with you. We'll get a team around you. And I'm just very confused because I'm like, is there kind of this shift happening where they're finding these creators, knowing they have a following, and they're not really tapping them? But because I'm like you, Doug, I mean, I was at absolutely the mercy of these retailers. I mean, to Doug, they tell you, oh, what else do you have? If you don't have an answer, you tell them something, because that's not the answer here.
Yeah.
And on that plane ride home, you're like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? But most recently, I saw that influencer kind of situation. I'm like, that's colorful.
Yeah, that's like an interesting dynamic shift. I feel like there's gonna be a lot, especially also post COVID. So much D2C blew up and everything. But awesome. Yeah, I would love to hear from Jen too. Can you talk through some of the retailers that you support? I know with your previous brands that you've worked with, there's probably a ton, but even Hempz is in a lot of the major retailers. And I was curious, like, how as the CMO, how do you look at how you support the different retailers?
Yeah, we have like a lot of different ones, because we have like professional, where you need a license as a hairdresser to shop there. We also have Ulta, which is kind of like the queen of the beauty space. There's Ulta and Sephora. Then we're in Walmart, and we definitely have a certain benchmark of units per week and productivity. And ours is probably different than other body care lotion brands, because our product is 1948. At Walmart, so it's very premium. Definitely also in drug, we're in CVS, Walgreens, Rite Aid, and then food, Kroger. So we're kind of all around the map. And then obviously it varies from retailer to retailer. So we really work very differently with each customer. With Ulta, we kind of own the store. We have 4 different points of exposure. We're the top body care brand in there. So we get like a lot of real estate. We also pay for that, of course, in various ways. In Walmart, it's a little bit different. We went in there in the fall, but we're expanding quite a bit, and it's a little bit more on shelf, and the use of IRCs and influencers make a big spike. Like when we have Ashley Benson, like we do exclusive scents for different retailers. So it's such a different ecosystem depending on what retailer you're in, but they all usually get, a pretty good support of paid social and then in-store tactics and displays. The other thing that works really well for Hempz is sampling. Very important for people to have like a true sensorial experience because of all the scents that we have. So we kind of do that. And when COVID happened and we were like, a lot of stores were closed and testers weren't a reality that was kind of awful. So now that's opening back up.
Awesome. And in terms of like when you're setting budgets, because I mean, that's so many different retailers, like how do you go about setting the budget from a marketing perspective for each of these different? Is it based on like how much the volume that you're selling there? Do the retailers, like, I guess when you came in, how did you reallocate that? Or is it, you know? How is that done?
Yeah, I mean, we're expanding so much. Like we're almost in 40,000 doors now. So we kind of have like exploded in terms of distribution. But, you know, in some of the strategic accounts, I would say we overinvest because of that's where we came from. But we also now invest based on the retailer contribution to sales and profitability, because some places you wouldn't expect are the most profitable to sell to, you know, than other accounts, even though they're not the biggest. So they still really, you know, do much better in terms of profit and bottom line. So it's kind of all over the map, but we definitely try to invest based on contribution to sales.
Cool. Yeah, no, so fascinating how different it can be per retailer. And like you were mentioning with Ulta, how you have to really pay for those points of sale.
Yeah.
And then to that point, I guess, going back to Jesse, when you were starting to expand, like, did you find that when you get into one retailer, it's easier to get into other retailers, or like, what is that kind of stepping stone look like?
So yes and no. It really depends, right? Like there's kind of a two-prong answer to this, in my opinion. It, like, you know, Doug was saying when he was launching like Halo Top as well, you really have to know your product and where you belong, because every retailer is definitely not created equal. You know, and that is for a plethora of reasons, right? Like hummus just doesn't do well in Nebraska. You know what I mean? It's just, it is what it is. So if you go out in Nebraska, you know, in 2013, 2014, it was a huge expense to kind of educate, i.e. promote and put on sale and, you know, push the product, versus if you go up in like New York or LA where people are eating healthier and more adventurous with food per se, it sells a heck of a lot easier. You know, we kind of, you know, to answer your question, we kind of really got, we shoehorned our way in creatively into Publix. It was a disaster of a launch, like every which way possible. At the same time, we also landed like Whole Foods, just the Florida region, which was kind of funny because we're just in the Florida region of Whole Foods, which at the time was like 40 stores, and then we're in 2,000 Publix. Like it was such a weird mix. And then next thing I know, again, you know, just being overly gung ho, I applied to be part of this Walmart Made in America program, which is like this big event they do for like early ventures. Got in, got accepted, and next thing I know, within, you know, basically 12 months of knocking on doors, we're nationwide. And Publix was already starting to kind of open the doors, but like once we kind of kicked in Walmart on accident, I mean, the floodgates opened, and it was good and bad, because we had a lot of retailers calling. The bad for us was we shouldn't have really said yes to as many retailers as we did early on, because, you know, as she mentioned before too, it's expensive, right? Depending on what retailers you go in. You know, to Doug's point as well, you know, you're at the mercy of them. So, you know, you could quickly turn the apple cart upside down fast and just create the Titanic, right? You're sinking, you're taking on water, i.e. you're spending money like crazy to open doors that you really don't need. And I remember meeting a brand at one of the trade shows where, you know, he was like, "Oh, how many stores are in?" I'm like, "Oh, 6,000." And he's like, "My God." You know, and he's like, "What are your sales?" And at that time, I think our sales were like, you know, $3 or $4 million. And he goes, "That's kind of crazy." And I'm like, "Well, how many stores are you in?" And he's like, "We're in like 800 Whole Foods." I'm like, "Oh, what are your sales?" He goes, 3 million. And I'm like, "Wait a minute." You know, I'm like, this is something skewed here, right? And again, it goes to velocities and, you know, what categories you're in. You know, we were in hummus, and then we were in salad dressings. Salad dressings are a really slow moving velocity type product. You know, we're talking about ice cream. Ice cream is probably much higher velocity to some degree. You know, so you really got to understand what your product is, what are the expected velocities, what kind of velocities can you expect, and then kind of look at your retail map from there. So a lot of lessons.
Yeah, so you would say if you were doing it again that you would have gone a little bit slower with the launch, or?
Very strategic. I would have picked the right retailer with the right amount of doors. So like for going all the way back to the hummus days, I probably would have launched very high end first, i.e. like Whole Foods, maybe a Publix, and I would have stuck with those and really cultivated that relationship, understood my product line, my product mix. You know, we got caught up, like Doug said earlier, in, we did well at Walmart coming out of the gates. And next thing I know, I've got another buyer calling me going, what do you have for me? We're not telling them no, so we too pulled 7 salad dressings kind of, out of a hat and brought them to life. And that was rough, expensive and kind of risky for the business because it was such a huge rollout and we had no idea if it was going to work. So, I think I just would have done things a little more controlled and focused versus just opening every door and taking almost every opportunity we could have. It can be done and there's a time and place for it. But that's usually the ones that require VC money and, raising rounds to be able to keep up with that fast growth and support that growth. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Doug, I guess since this is now, after all of your learnings from Halo Top and moving into Gatsby, what were your biggest takeaways that you're learnings that you're kind of applying to this new venture?
Yeah, I think a lot has changed and nothing has changed in a lot of ways. So I still think for the next decade, retail is where it's at. If you want to build a $100 million brand, I don't think you can do it without retail, particularly in the US, and particularly with the cost of acquisition on Facebook, Instagram, and other platforms now. So I think retail is where it's at. I'll be very practical. Jesse and I, and probably every other startup, started the same way, trying to do it directly and sell it indirectly. It's a necessary cost of doing business, but you have to use a broker or one or more brokers. Those are the people or the companies that will have the data that can tell you, the right ones at least can tell you what the category velocities are and need to be. There's regional ones, there's national ones, there's account specific ones, there's mom and pop ones. I've been with every single type of broker you can imagine. I swear we've been through 15 brokers. A broker is a broker is a broker. Nobody will sell it as well as you. I don't care what broker is saying that they have fixed the broker network and they're the be all end all. No, they're not, but that's okay. They are necessary because they'll save you time. You have to value your time. There's too many things to do. It won't be perfect, but you will work harder and longer and get nowhere trying to do it yourself and call, head offices and get contacts. The brokers have the relationships. They ideally represent brands that are bigger than you. And can get meetings with the buyers. It's all about meetings. Once they get a meeting, you get there and you do the meeting. You get 10 minutes, 15 minutes max usually. And you do what you can in that 10 to 15 minutes. I try to say clear, concise, and compelling. That's what your deck needs to be. But we've learned a ton, and we still make mistakes, to be clear. But I would say the only thing I would say, I think Jesse's right when it comes to scaling, being thoughtful about who you go with and why and when. On the early stage, though, even for us at Gatsby Chocolate, beggars aren't choosers. So we're aggressively trying to meet with as many retailers as we can. That doesn't mean we'll say yes to everybody, but trust me, not everybody's saying yes to us either. So it's not like we have our choice. If you have your choice, go, Walmart, Kroger, Whole Foods, call it a day. Like that's, you'll be great. But I think that's where, and the last thing I'll say, because Melinda said something that I thought was really important, and our philosophy at Gatsby, and we got away from this at Halo Top to our detriment, was you shouldn't sell on a product unless the product will do the retention for you. Because I think good marketing can always sell your product once, but only the product quality and differentiation is going to sell it twice. So if your product isn't there from your R&D and your innovation departments, don't sell it in yet. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Nothing will be perfect, but it better be good enough to retain. Otherwise, you're going to spend so much time and money selling in and selling out, and it's just going to be putting water in a leaky bucket, and that's not good for morale or anything else. So we are really hypersensitive to what products we decide to sell in, particularly in retail. E-com, you can be a lot more in and out, kind of take some risks. But for retail, we try to be really thoughtful about, 99 out of 100 people are going to be mind blown by this product and buy it again if they buy it once.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And I feel like to that point of like making sure that that unique selling point, we work with so many brands that are just launching their product and we're trying to get creators posting about them, and the creators maybe don't even want to claim the product to post about it. And I'm like, you probably need to do your marketing more if like they're not even willing to work with it yet. You know what I mean?
That's a great sign
to redirect. And to that point, we also have some that like, you put out there and 100% of the creators we show it to claim it. And I'm like, you guys have something there. And then we get their product feedback, and you can see the difference between the brands. Like the best performing, even influencer marketing campaigns are the ones with the best product. And at the end of the day, like nothing fixes, nothing will fix your sales if you don't have a good product. But yeah, Melinda, I'd love, since you've worked with so many brands, to like hear from you what you think really makes a brand stand out in retail and makes them successful from that like marketing, but also unique product selling point perspective as well.
Absolutely. I love your litmus test there of like, if the influencers can't even like get excited about it, you're in trouble. That's a marketer's dream. I mean, yes, if I get a great product that's like mind blowing, it's an exciting challenge, because now you have to just figure out, how do I take this amazing thing and translate it into a communication that consumers are going to respond to. So that's absolutely step one. But to Doug's point, it doesn't have to be perfect, because everybody is, even the big brands are iterating and fixing and, trying to improve as they get consumer feedback. One of the things that I think is interesting when you're working, at some of these bigger CPG companies and slightly bigger brands, although, big brands are introducing smaller niche brands too, and they're actually learning a lot from entrepreneurs and founder-led brands to try to understand, how do I think smaller so I can really go after a niche consumer and scale up in that way. And one of the things that, as marketers and brand owners, you have to remember is it's super important to partner with the retailer where you can. Some retailers you have better relationships with. I think Doug spoke about brokers. Even some big companies use brokers too, some smaller accounts, because it is all about that relationship. So understanding kind of what those retailer priorities are, where you can fit into their strategic plan, how you can partner together. Because if you can build that relationship, you can unlock tools, unlock assets, truly partner together and see it less as they still are your landlord, but that doesn't mean you can't be friendly with the landlord. You can't, you can always, knock on the door, ask for some milk, have a cup, have a glass of wine or something. But that's important. And then I think the other thing that a lot of, it's easy to lose sight of as a brand leader, but it's super important at retail is, especially at the bigger, food, drug, mass customers, there's not a ton of space, when you're on the shelf. So your product and your packaging has to do like 90% of the hard work. Yeah. So yes, you need to have a product that works, but you also need to make sure whatever that unique selling proposition or differentiating like wow thing comes across on that package, and that when someone picks it up, they can clearly see what benefit they're getting, why it's different, and really, attract them and help them to kind of convert and to buy. So that's super important. And I think you can lose sight of that when you're kind of designing and developing products, but it's very important to make sure you're designing for the retail space, and that packaging is working hard for you, because you may not get advertising at shelf. You may not get that communication at shelf. And so that package really has to work hard. So I think that's like an important kind of retail nuance that we have to kind of remember as brand owners.
For sure. And when you're looking, I guess, at that packaging, are there any tips for, I assume once, you pick the packaging and it gets out there, it's really hard to change it as well. So I guess for putting your best foot forward, do you do a bunch of like testing beforehand, or like how have the brands you've worked with dealt with like figuring out what the right packaging is, to really stand out amongst the competitors that are on the shelf?
No, absolutely. You definitely test. I mean, you think about like what the benefit is that you have and how a consumer would use it. So a little bit of kind of, customer and user experience, like, is your packaging easy to use? Is it something like, I'm in beauty, does it look beautiful? Are people going to want to keep it like on their vanity or shelf? Does it overcome a problem that maybe a different type, a competitor hasn't figured out, but you figured out how to, make the usage piece, easier or, more fluid to use? Does it stand out on shelf? So like, right now, I work on a brand called Got to Be, and it's a bright yellow package, and like everybody knows it for the bright yellow can and the bright yellow like tube, and so I'll see it all over the place. Like not because we paid for endorsements, because people use it. You'll see it like in random YouTube videos or like on TV shows, and it's just this bright yellow can. So I mean, things like that are things you want to look at, but you definitely want to test with consumers. You definitely want to like get some feedback. And I know for smaller brands, you may not have like huge budgets, but I remember, back in my L'Oreal days, I started off in a very small brand. I mean, we would literally in New York City, like talk to consumers on coming off the subway. I mean, you would get feedback however you could. And you'd be surprised, like just being scrappy and kind of getting a sample of, several people, it can help give you direction that, you wouldn't normally have. And make sure it's a diverse set of people. Like it's actually your consumers and a broad array of people that, can kind of torture test your packaging ideas and your product ideas.
Yeah, no, I feel like nothing can replace actually just hearing, unbiased accounts of what the product looks like. And it just reminds me too, like whenever we're doing any sort of marketing campaigns, and when I worked at the agency, it's like, from the agency world, we'll get products. And if we have, people, like if people can't tell the difference between your product or remember it, like that bright yellow can or something like that, it's an uphill battle if it's kind of generic or you don't really see it. The same thing happens when we work with influencer marketing campaigns, like really making it stand out. I think is something sometimes people don't, like they try to think through, but then they don't picture it on the shelf and what it looks like with the other brands. But Jen, to that point too, you've worked with so many different skincare, hair care products now. I know that's a super highly competitive space. You mentioned like, the point of sale and some of the different, tactics that Hempz uses in terms of point of sale. I'd love to hear more about like the creativity or different ways that you approach how to partner with retailers for some of those activations.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have a similar experience. I worked on, before Hempz, it was Sexy Hair, and it's known for a big red can of hairspray. And like almost everyone has one that's a woman. Sorry, guys. Maybe some guys do too now. But, that really leveraging the packaging, the star on the can. We put mirrors at retail when we can, because everyone likes to kind of check yourself out in a mirror, and then you can like look at yourself, and then it's brought to you by Sexy Hair. But definitely a lot of places you cannot have the whole storytelling visual experience. At Ulta, we totally get that. We have visuals, we have rail strips, we story tell about the ingredients and the scents. But like at places like Walmart or CVS, we definitely have to have the package stand for itself. We have a big bottle of moisturizer with a pump that's very distinctive. We definitely decorate the label and kind of talk about the sensorial experience. So we leverage the real estate that we have, and we kind of have, a moisturizer that looks different with that pump and with the size. So again, like it's harder to tell that story when you're in a environment, but we test the package. There's so many places to test. There's online panels that make it really easy to test like what Walmart shoppers go for versus Target shoppers versus Ulta shoppers. You can build samples up. Also, like scrappy on the street, whether it's like, on the corner of Dallas or in, at the subway or whatever, just showing people new designs, particularly when we did facial skincare, because that was a completely new thing for us. We did a lot of focus groups and testing. So again, however you can get feedback, and what sometimes resonates with a Ulta shopper might not resonate as much with, a food, drug, mass shopper. Like there are some nuances that you kind of have to play with, and sometimes there are exclusive packages or scents or designs that might work better in one environment or the other.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. That's great that there's also online things for getting product feedback as well. Kind of going back to Jesse, I had a quick question around like retailers. I think we had talked about this in the past, but it feels like more retailers, based on what you were saying earlier with that one creator. We've heard some of our brands talk about how your social presence is becoming more important for retailers, and they're starting to look into how many followers you have and those types of pieces. Can you kind of expand upon what you've seen in terms of like the footprint of not only your physical footprint, but your digital footprint that they're looking for?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny because you can use your social presence for so many ways in the realm of a retailer, right? So, they're really looking at, again, I'll use that influencer recently. he had a massive following, you know, and he was doing like okay sales with a really janky website. So someone at Walmart picked up like, hey, if you tweaked this, and put it on our site, we'd probably, you know, move some product. They gave him a small runway, and he like, you know, blew the minds of everyone in Walmart basically in that category. So one of the things we did was we went on and said, I remember this is like 2018, 2019. We were trying to go nationwide with Whole Foods. And it was weird because we went regional Florida, but because we went into Walmart, like shortly after that, like Whole Foods kind of got in this like kind of war and like wouldn't let us expand because we went to Walmart and they just got really, you know, kind of hurt over it, I guess. So long story short, we spent a couple of years trying to get across the nation in Whole Foods. And so finally what we did is we got on social media and we basically were like, who wants us in Whole Foods? Just simply tag yes or shoot us a DM, or better yet, tag Whole Foods. Go to Whole Foods social media and tell them you want, you know, oh dang, these products carried. It went a little bigger than we thought because we had a couple of
Very clever, yeah.
Yeah, we had a couple of influencers pick up on it and thought it was kind of funny to torture Whole Foods. So they shared it, and we ended up like locking up like Whole Foods Facebook page for like 6 hours because people were just like, you know, it was just, we literally said, just go write oh dang on it. Just kind of troll them, you know? Can't say again that was the best thing I've ever done because I literally had the buyer call me about 24 hours later and she was like in a closet, it sounded like, and she's whispering. She goes, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, hey, nothing. What are you up to? And she's like, no, what are you doing? You're going to get me fired. And I'm like, oh, I'm like, is this over the oh dang thing? And she goes, yes. Like all of Austin corporate office is like, who is this? She's like, the whole damn company knows who you are right now. And they're probably not in the greatest way. So I was like, well, we have a little pool, I guess, right? Like people, you know, they want us in there. So we ended up getting in there because of it. Again, we did some really guerrilla stuff, but you can definitely leverage. Another thing we used to do is we'd print off like every request we'd have, like, hey, are you carried in Publix? Are you carried in Publix? We'd print those off for our yearly buyer meetings and be like, look, you know, people want this in your store, you know, so it's just that concrete proof that your tribe is activated. They like to see an activated tribe. They like to know if we announce you're in Publix, boom, you know what I mean? We could turn our tribe on to go buy that product at Publix. You know, so anything you could do to help them generate new consumers that are not coming into their retailer, and you can prove that, or you can give them some kind of exclusive item. Like I know, you know, I believe Melinda, you were talking about, you know, doing kind of exclusive products for retailers. Mm-hmm. You know, they love that, right? So if you're saying, you know, we normally do a yellow can or we do a red can, but for Target, we're going to do a blue can, and it's only at Target, like wham. You know, that's why Oreo does those really unique flavors for Target. That was kind of a big thing for them. You know, it gets the retailer really excited. It's a cool social media play for you as a brand. So it's like a big collab. You know what I mean? So using your social media presence, having a social media presence is so much more than just getting a couple likes. You could really leverage and harness it to grow your business retail-wise.
Yeah, no, that's another awesome story that you know, shut down their Facebook account. Put that in the playbook for other brands to do. I'm sure Whole Foods will love that.
Tread lightly.
Yeah. Since we're coming to the end here, I do want to open it up for some questions. So if anyone wants to drop some questions as I go, as that's happening in the chat, I will ask. I would love, Doug, if you want to start it off of just like what's like the biggest learning you've had or thing you would tell brands like you wish you knew when you were getting into retail and expanding.
I know I sound like a broken record. It comes down to your product. You have to be so objectively savage with yourself and your team. And I see so many brands that, you know, they want to get in the startup game and they want to post on LinkedIn about a capital raise or that they launched at this account or that. And they just, I can tell they're just setting themselves up for failure because the product's not good enough or it's not differentiated enough. So I really push, starting with ourselves. Like nobody pushes ourselves harder than us to just, and we did this with Gatsby. We launched with a product formula that wasn't good enough, with a product packaging that wasn't good enough. We rebranded and reformulated within the first 3 months of launching. That's how quickly we moved and how bad it was. So you just have to take your ego out of that. You can't, it's a sunk cost, whatever you've done in the past. You just have to move quickly, and you really have to focus on the product. The product has to retain. That's what it comes down to at the end of the day.
Makes total sense. Let me jump in. I see some questions coming in. Jacqueline wants to know, I'll ask this to Melinda, because I think you were the one talking about it. How do we find out what the typical velocity for our category is with a retailer? Or if you're not sure, someone else can jump in too if anyone does know. How do you find out what the typical velocity is?
Yeah, I think Jesse and Doug, I can't remember which one touched on it, but if you don't necessarily have that relationship, like working with a broker can help get you some of those retailer specific type of data that you may not have access to if you're a smaller brand. But it is important to kind of have that and to get the sales data so that you can understand like where you stand and what hurdles you have to, overcome. And I think, Doug, you said it, you have, and to get those meetings and to get that input and to really make the best use of your 10 or 15 minutes. And don't feel bad, because even on bigger brands, it's not like the buyers give us time either. Like you have to really kind of
That's refreshing, Melinda. Thank you.
Exactly.
I've always wondered that. So it's fascinating hearing from you and Jennifer both, because I'm like, oh, you guys deal with this too.
Yeah, it just depends on the retailer, because I will tell you, like those media darling, like that influencer talked about, who they actually went to start a brand. Like if you have something that's really unique and different, and that's like almost cult following, you can ride that glory train like right on in the station, because they're all retailers are looking to diversify their assortment, or they're really looking to compete with, e-commerce and be seen as modern and up to date. So yeah, but in terms of the velocity metrics, I think if you can find, that mom and pop broker to kind of, work with, and it is an investment, but I think Doug, made the great point about like time is money. So, if you want to be fruitful and move forward, you need to kind of invest in the kind of tools to get you that information.
Mm-hmm. And I have another question here that says, what are the first 2 steps to get in front of a buyer? And I guess anybody who feels confident that there's clear 2 steps to get in front of a buyer wants to jump in.
I think it depends on like which, obviously like, a Walmart food, drug, mass is harder. And like Melinda and all of you are saying, it's good to have a broker to kind of partner with that already works within like that ecosystem. But, other places like in beauty, like Ulta is a little bit, if you have a great idea or an amazing insight or an influencer, or just have some white space, like you can get an appointment, by pitching your idea, particularly if it's unique enough. And, you can do I've had friends that have pitched their ideas and now they're in Ulta. So they, I think it's just different. I think like the Walmarts are much harder unless you have like a broker that's already in, that can kind of help you, get in front of the right people.
And I also think Walmart and Target both have like incubator programs. I think Jesse, I think Jesse mentioned that you kind of got in that way with Walmart. But they have, because they're also looking, they're always looking to, expand their assortment and turn it over and keep it fresh. So
they want that diamond, right? That they want what each other doesn't have. So if they can cultivate.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Target's actually doing a cool program.
Yeah, they're all competing against each other. So they all want like that unique, differentiated next holy grail thing. And they'll like, that's true. So if you have something special and unique,
so you
listen.
like, and finding those key people to pitch is, you could just go to their website, find their email, or what's like no, probably not.
Yeah,
I assume that's some. Like,
it's harder to do that. Yeah, you have to do a little detective or like
LinkedIn bingo.
Evidently, we have some good stalkers on the panel, so
Yeah, I have another question here. When pitching into retail, what does the buyer want to hear to close the deal? Which is a great question. Like, is it especially if you have no track record in another big box retailer, what are they wanting to see?
I think the biggest thing is incrementality, meaning that you're going to grow their pie and not just steal share. So that's what we hammer home with, hey, your current customers are going to buy more because it's lower calorie, or new customers who aren't shopping the category are going to come into this category and buy more. Plus, we usually are premium price, so the price raises the category. But those are the three things that we hit, and that's what it's music to buyers' ears. Well, you'll tell them what they want to hear, and then they'll yell at you and tell you you're wrong.
Because you're essentially taking the spot of another thing on their shelf, right? So if you can prove that
so you want to say you're going to be more productive than what's there, but you also want to make the point, we're not just going to steal share from Ben & Jerry's and Haagen-Dazs. We're actually going to bring in a new customer, or those current customers are going to buy more, so the total category pie is going to grow for the retailer, which then the greatest interest is self-interest. These are human beings. They get raises and bonuses and new positions and based on how they grow their categories, and they usually sit on the desk for at most 2 years. So they want to see if they can grow categories by mid to high single digits, God forbid double digit growth, and they're going to be on the fast track internally to get new and better jobs and raises at their companies. I would focus on that individual. That's who you're talking to in these meetings, and how do you get through to them that this will help them, their career. That's what we
piggybacking off of Doug.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Exactly what he said as far as like growing like his ice cream category. He grew the ice cream category as a whole. When we were at the hummus showcase itself, we looked at the rest of the grocery store and went, okay, what's dormant, and what other buyer can we get really excited to grow their category that hasn't had any growth? So that's how we ended up in salad dressings, shelf stable. There was no growth. So while he's watching everybody hit the deli showcase for hummus and it's having these record sales, we went, peeled off, went over to a dormant category and went, what if we could bring hummus to you? And all the buyers were like, wait a minute. Yes, like absolutely. We were like, to Doug's point, you're helping them. And that's the thing. They're not there to help you. They don't care about you. They just don't. That's the raw truth, right? Like it's a landlord, renter situation. But how can you help them? If you can help them and solve a problem or make it enticing, that's a nice cherry on top.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know we're pretty much at time. It seems like we have gone through a lot of questions, and there's probably even more, but we'll be pinging all of you with the recording of this webinar just to recap where to find all of our panelists. I just want to thank you all. Like, this was such a great conversation, but I definitely will be mindful of everyone's time. Here is if you can all see my deck, hopefully it's showing. You can see where to find everybody. So you can follow Melinda and Doug on LinkedIn. You can find Jen and Hempz on all of the social. You have Jesse Wolfe, and then you can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter. We will definitely be doing more of these panels in the future as well. So look out for that. We'll even ask probably what you guys want to see in future panel discussions. Also, if you're interested in talking to Statusphere about getting creators posting about your brand or to help your retail support, we do have a discussion link below that you can book a call, and we would love to chat with you. But yeah, thank you all so much for your time. This was like so awesome. I know we came right up to the end. I want to make sure to get as many questions in as possible, but Jesse, Doug, Jen, and Melinda, seriously, like awesome time. It seems like everyone really appreciated it. So have an awesome rest of your day. And I'll just be hanging out here for just a little bit in case anyone has any questions for me or anything like that. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Thanks,
Good
everybody.
talking with you guys.
Nice meeting you all.
Kristen, this platform's amazing. I love how the link just came right up the minute you said.
Yeah, so I have Sam, our team. She like plugs all the thing in the background. But yeah, we've gone through a few of these platforms and would definitely recommend. This is Demio, in case anyone's wondering.
No, I'm like, this is nice.
yeah. Happy to chat if you're looking about putting together an event, because we've been doing these quite a lot since COVID hit, and it's been great. So
this is smooth sailing, so I appreciate it.
So, awesome. No, I so appreciate you taking the time. So have a great rest of your day.
Absolutely. You too. Bye, Kristen.
Bye. Cool. Thanks, everybody. Once again, we will be sending the recording of this out, and we hope to do more of these in the future. Thank you for your time. And I'll click to the next slide real quick. As a reminder, we do have the Power of the User-Generated Content in 2022 webinar, so you can click that RSVP button on your screen now or scan the QR code. Can you ask Doug about which brokers you use? I can try to ping them and get some of those answers. Actually, Sam, if you're on here, if we could take down some of the questions and see if we could like follow up with them and see if we could get some of those answers, that would be great as well. I know Jesse Wolfe is also very active on social media, and he's pretty responsive as well. If you follow him, the real Jesse Wolfe on Instagram, I know he's also very responsive and has worked with a lot of brands to help them from his consulting business as well. But awesome, thank you. I'm glad you guys found it valuable. I'll just hang out here in case there's any other questions that come through the chat that you want us to send. Cool. All right, Sam, I'm going to click off, but I'm going to go off stage, but I'll stay here so that you can grab all the questions. I think that would be great. And it would be great if we could put together maybe a blog post of some of the highlights as well. So cool. Thanks, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.